Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there, Rulers. DMO73 here, bringing you some feature match for the week between myself on a 4 or 5-ish kind of style color Faria Heroes deck with the 5 heroes, and I'm playing against Paul, who is playing the Ghost in the Shell kind of most optimized version of the list we've seen so far, the Aramaki Tron, style Ghost in the Shell list. So this was something we wanted to bring to you guys because Ghost in the Shell's been out for a while, and then also this was just a pretty fun Faria list that I've kind of come up with that makes use of a very thematic concept for the deck, but at its core is a take on the idea of using Faria as a J-Ruler beatdown deck. So very excited to be able to bring this to you guys, but here we go. We're going to go ahead and get started with game 1. Faria is going to be on the draw here. As a Regalia deck, you like being on the draw. Aramaki doesn't particularly mind either way. It just means that like the you can't quite like energize into Motoko on turn 1. So first stone, one of the 3, obviously, a third of the way to being able to play 7 will. We play the Togusa that looks at the top 3 and puts 1 back. Gets to keep 1 and put the other 2 back on the top of the deck in any order. Light Vapors for first stone for me. Down comes a Pierre, the Swiftwing Archer, one of our 5 heroes here. We swing in the air for 4. So Pierre's not going to get nearly as many counters in this deck as opposed to an Arla list, but we do like to use him because he likes turn 1 aggression play, as well as can be a little bit defensive, and it can help us turn on Faria for being only having to pay 1 green will to play Faria because he is a 5 hero. So no turn 2, but he does have 2 of the 3 stones that he needs to be able to start producing 7 will a turn. Second Light Vapors for me, not a great start. We're going to go ahead and play Excalibur here to get a Stranger and try to draw a card. He's going to respond to that by forcing me to banish the Pierre by diving Aramaki and Togusa, one of the very, very good dive cards, especially when you get the 2-drop unit that makes all of your dives get doubled. At that point in time, we just have to pass the turn. And here we see some of the craziness that can come out of this deck. So turn 3, suddenly 7 will is able to slam down the 7-drop major. I can't cancel it. Gonna swing in for 14, and then another 2, taking me immediately down to 24, and gaining him up to being 5,000. Sorry, I believe he's actually down to 23. So already a pretty bad place for me to be because of the access that it has flying and everything else. We're going to use Twin Swords during the upkeep here to put his Togusa back on top of the deck. We kind of have to perform Judgment this turn, but unfortunately not having a green source, we can't like play a Wings of the Archangel to be able to Judgment, which would put us in a pretty good spot because then we'd be a 14-14 and be able to kind of trade with the... and there's our green source right there, but we'd be able to trade, or at least with the Eternal of our God Art, be able to answer at least one of the majors. Unfortunately, we don't have it. We do have the wings here, so we're going to go ahead and play that, set ourselves up for the next turn. I think we do the mode to draw a card here. We want to leave a lot of the strangers for this deck in the stranger deck because we want to have them be able to be flipped with Faria. But you know, we're knowing that we're staring down a pretty hefty board state here, and now every single stone that he brings into play after this is going to be producing more than 1. So suddenly he has access to 10. So here he has another major in hand. So swinging in the air for potentially lethal here, just even by themselves, which is insane. Swings at the Twin Swords. We were ready to try to do something about it, but ultimately chosen to go for the non-lethal play line of attacking the Twin Swords instead, gaining another 14, and then choosing to go face to take me down to 900 and him up to 78. This gives us at least a little bit of an option. He could have pushed face. We did have something that we were going to try to do here, which we'll get to do it now, which is Awakening of the Winged Lord, to try to see if we can hit a Regalia or a Charlotte or something of the nature. We do see another Wings of the Archangel, so this is great. We can use this to Judgment our Faria for free, so that we get to go into having a lot of resources here. Perform the Judgment of Faria for free. This gets us a Stranger into play for free as well. Hoping to hit one of our bigger ones like that Ushua. The Ushua unfortunately wouldn't have do much because he couldn't target any of his resonators, but there's some other ones that we can hit, such as like a Jabberwock or something like that could be pretty beneficial. Ultimately seeing Tree Man, who's going to get to recover us a stone. It's nice having that 2,000 body. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to matter because it doesn't fly. We ultimately just need to survive the turn here. Burning our Energize and 1 to play out a Charlotte. This makes our Faria a 24/24. And then choosing to cast an Excalibur here. So with Excalibur on the field, we get to do a lot of cool things. We get to use Charlotte to trigger to get us to draw 2 cards, and we can put a Stranger into field. Unfortunately, normally we would RFG one of his heavy hitters, but we don't have. They both have barriers, so there's nothing to hit there. Twin Swords of Water and Mercy. Unfortunately, going to have to target itself and put itself back on top of the deck because we don't want to lose Tree Man and we don't want to lose. We do get to draw the 2 cards first because we have to resolve everything there. But then we have to put we're still waiting to resolve the Mythic trigger as well. We could, if we had another 1-drop in hand, we could use target the Twin Swords and then use that Alice's Castling that you see in my hand to put it back on the bottom of the deck and put another 1-drop into play. Unfortunately, we didn't have one. All we have is a couple of Violas, which aren't gonna, a couple of Valas, which again aren't gonna do much against a deck that has a bunch of barrier. So that does tap us out, except for Sword Will. We do have the ability to perform God Art, choosing to do the force me to banish a Resonator, which I'll banish Tree Man, and then give Swiftness mostly to just set up a bunch of dives to be able to play them in the following turn. Again, he's going into, at this point in time, a total of 12 will with all those stones, so has just a full grip of stuff. Every single time he casts one from the RFG with Aramaki, gets to draw a card, gets to cast them for 1 less. There's just a lot of resources that the Aramaki deck, once it gets turned on, can just kind of overwhelm your opponent with value. Especially with the ease in which they can search up the 7-drop major. The other problem here is the life gain. The Faria Heroes deck, any of the Faria Beats decks, can put out a lot of pressure, a lot of damage very quickly, but anytime they have to deal with life gain, it means that it's more times that the Faria has to swing, and sometimes that gets to be a little bit extreme. And the problem is here in this matchup, even though I deal damage by swinging, he can just regenerate it right back with his majors. So the fact that he's already up on life means that even if I have the Faria, I'm not much of a threat, because he's always going to be able, even if he lets the swings with the Faria go through, he's always going to be able to deal more damage than I can do regaining the health back, especially if he can keep my Charlottes off board. Obviously, multiple Charlottes means that that stops being an issue, but I have to get multiple Charlottes on board first. And in a deck that has banish effects that get around barrier, that's a big deal. So we're going to see a dive for Borma. This is one of those big deals like I'm talking about. So he's going to kill his own Aramaki, or his own Togusa, which doesn't really matter. But it's also just going to kill my Charlotte. Ultimately, to try to draw some more cards, I'm going to go ahead and produce double blue with the Faria, with the Excalibur here. The whole point is to try to do Alice's Castling. I get to get that, so bring into play the Vala, get to then draw a card, so Twin Swords of Water Mercies comes back, the Vala gets swapped with them, and then they just get killed anyway. Mostly just wanted to get that Twin Swords into my hand, as well as to be able to potentially bounce whatever he follows up with, because I technically, with the God Art, have the ability to answer one of the majors. I just can't answer both of them, so I have to have some way to be able to, or I can answer one, which in turn answers the second one, but I have to be able to answer anything he follows up with, because I'm going to be pretty low on life after that. Diving the major to be able to look at my hand. See, we have another Charlotte, a Shakti, The main reason we didn't bring in the Shakti is we just don't have any other sword arts to make activated. The Shakti is pretty powerful if you can bring it into play effectively with Lars being on the field or the Alice's castling, because suddenly then your Awakening of the Sacred Queen gets you 2 Regalias, your Awakening of the Winged Lord gets you 2 cards. You just get to really start to go off and make some really, really insane value off of it. Still has some floating will here. Swings in for 14. We're going to go ahead and use the God Art of Faria, producing double white. So we had 1 blue floating at this point. Seeing that we're safe from his Swiftness Resonator being brought into play, we get to block. We gain 18, but he will gain 14. And I do have Eternal, so even if he swings in with the other one, it will kill it. So swings in for the 14. Have to take that. Go down to 13. He goes up to 10,600. And then he does have enough floating here to actually recast the Swiftness, but it only deals 1,200, so it'll put me at 100 life left. So no way to pump it up. I go down to 100, and unfortunately at that point in time, really not much I can do because of the barrier there, but we're going to see it through and see what happens. Fortunately, can't afford to cull stone. I didn't have to reveal that frig to him, but apparently in this situation I just do it anyway. So staring down this board state, the top deck card there was a Lars, which I just don't have enough will to be able to make stuff work with. I mean, I can play the Lars here into a Faria. The other option would be to play the Charlotte, but I think his Aramaki, I think his major is locking me from being able to play the Charlotte so that my Faria can't kill his major that's on board. Because if I could, then I'd be in a much better position. Not great, because I'd still have everything else that he has on the field. The problem being that I just, there's so much pressure and he's going to be able to draw so many cards that the likelihood they can find another major is very, very, very high. There's a lot of different cards in the deck that could just get you major straight to your hand. And so once it's kind of turned on, it's pretty hard to answer. So down comes Lars. This does let us play the Faria, which is very, very nice. Because if I control another 5 hero, I only have to pay 1 green to be able to play her. And the nice thing here is with Lars and Faria on the field, I have a flyer that has barrier that prevents the first damage that's dealt to it, meaning that I can technically block the major. So I choose, and also I could use Lars to hit the first major, to block anything that he has on the ground either. The problem is here I have to kind of, I'm matching him card-wise here, which doesn't put me in a good spot. I do have the twin swords to be able to bounce something back to the hand, which is advantageous, but I have to still be careful here. I have to just be able to prevent the pressure here. Ultimately choosing to go ahead and try to kill the 1200 for swiftness, and then leaving the Faria to be able to block the major. So at that point in time, we pass the turn. Gets another 3 will, and so at that point in time, there's pretty much nothing I can do to be able to recast it. I mean, he can just play the Tagusa Aramaki from the RFG, draw 3 cards, and the likelihood that he finds either a search card for a major or a second major, like you see there, there's the third major that he can just easily pay with even the floating. He chooses to keep the floating and leave his 3 stones up, just plays a second major, and at that point in time, I'm going to concede the game because there's nothing I can do to answer both of them. So we go on to game 2. As we go into the next game, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell down below so you're notified when all of our videos goes live, and consider supporting the channel by being a member here on YouTube or by checking it out on Patreon for all the cool exclusive perks that come with supporting us. Thank you guys so much. Let's go to the next game. So in game 2 here, going to be choosing, I think, to go first. The idea being that I want as many turns as possible to be able to play before Aramaki gets the chance to be on Tron. So yes, I'm giving him one more will at the beginning, but I'm giving myself 3 full turns to be able to play before he's potentially on 7 will, which I think is the right call. So gusting size off the top, very, very nice. I want to see that green early for this deck to be able to play Wings of the Archangel, Faria, stuff like that. Down comes the Pierre, quick 400 damage that we pass there. See that Tagusa? Again, look at the top 3, pick one, put the rest on the bottom of the top of the deck in any order. Another Gusting Skies here, would have preferred it to be a blue source, but we can still at least play the Wings of the Archangel to draw a card and set us up for like an Awakening of the Winged Lord play here. Swing in for another 4 with Pierre, take him down to 32. This is great. So this is what we really want to see playing against the Aramaki deck. So we hit 2 of the same stone, turns 1 and 2. This means that, yes, when he eventually does hit Tron, he's going to have a lot of will, but this gives me another turn of not having to keep up with that. And so it gives me more of a turn to set up. And the Faria deck, if it sets up, can definitely really keep up with the Aramaki deck. So playing 2 here, he's gonna play another Aramaki. Or sorry, no, that's the one that lets his dive effects be doubled. Finally seeing that blue-white source. You see I have a castling in hand. That's very, very good. I do have a Vala, but I have no way to cast it. I'd need to put another a 2-drop into play first. Nice thing is, if I had a so I'll go ahead and play the Charlotte. If I had a Faria at that point, then I'm actually in a pretty good spot, because I could play the Faria for 1 and then castle it into the Vala if I wanted to, or castle it into a Shakti, or do all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of efficiencies that are made better by this deck having access to Faria for 1 green. Another Prime Minister, so once again just sitting at 3 will on turn 3, which is not where he wants to be at all, because he knows next turn with a Faria on the field, or with a Charlotte on the field, the next turn there's probably a Faria Judgment. He doesn't really have the way to be able to answer the Faria right now. And if I can get it down with a Charlotte protected, then he's in a much worse spot. Thinking through his options here, decides to go ahead and try to swing at the Pierre. We'll use Pierre's ability to try to shoot him for 1. He's going to burn his Energize here to try to die, to give it +15/+15, which would be +3k/+3k. We'll respond by shooting Pierre again. So the reason why that happened there is arguably, if you can remember back to the old days, Pierre is bow, and so Paul got a little bit confused there about the fact that Pierre doesn't need to tap to burn his counters. He just can burn the counters to deal damage. So tried to get through to kill the Pierre there, ultimately didn't really do much, kind of burned his whole turn being able to do that. So a little bit of a misplay, but there really doesn't seem to be much else he could have done here. We're just going to go ahead and pay for Judgment, because we're going to go ahead and just get the body out there. We want the Charlotte there. We want the 2020 Flyer, knowing that he's so far behind, and knowing that there's no possibility of him being able to play the 7-drop Aramaki next turn, especially now that we hit Twin Swords and we reset his Togusa. Go ahead and swing down for 4. Up to 4 will, but probably a little bit too late. Staring down a 2020 Flyer and a 4/4 Flyer. The deck outside of Aramaki, outside of the 7-drop, just doesn't have Flyers. So if he doesn't have something for this turn, then he's probably not going to get to go anywhere. does decide to play the Togusa back into the play, I believe, here, just to see if maybe he can find something. But I think ultimately there's not much else the deck can do. And so this is one of those moments where the Aramaki deck, and it's probably one of the reasons why we didn't see it played at Collinsville, is the fact that, yes, if you can hit the stones early, you have a lot of strength. But if it whiffs early, every single turn that you don't get it past turn 3, your opponent just has more and more time to set up, and the tools that Aramaki has are made infinitely better by the fact that all of your stones produce so much will. So if you have a shortage or just not seeing those resources, the bodies that you're putting out outside of the 7-drop are just not super great. So, we dive here for the Aramaki and Togusa. We're going to play him draw 3 cards, but that taps him out, and it doesn't really do anything other than just, so the draw power for this deck is insane for how much it can just continually refill its hand. But again, if it doesn't have the ability to be able to play that 7-drop quickly, no amount of card draws is going to be able to keep up with some of the bodies that other decks can just put out in the early games, especially not J-Rulers. So down comes Faria for that 1 green. Swing in for 20 in the air. Down to 4. And then swing in for 4 for lethal with Pierre. So then we get there and we go into game 3. So Paul choosing to put me on the draw, which is the smart move. It gives him more chances to be able to hit that stone base early, which is what he wants. Energized to that deck isn't super important, as opposed to being able to suddenly jump ahead of your opponent so much faster with having those stones be what they need to be. First stone green blue, it's what the deck likes to see. We're going to go ahead and slam down that Wings of the Archangel just on turn 1 to be able to immediately have access to flying, draw a card, set ourselves up for some Awakening of the Winged Lord, things like that. We're going to dive with the Major. Okay, we do have an Awakening of the Winged Lord there, which is what we're trying to hope for. Use Awakening of the Winged Lord to slam into an Excalibur during the upkeep, get a Stranger, be able to Judgment for free, set ourselves up for being in a pretty good spot in the early game. Second Prime Minister. The hope is in that early flip that you hit one of your tree man, like if you're flipping on 1 stone, that you hit the tree man, being that you want to be able to get the 2nd stone, so that, on the follow-up turn you're going into 2 and you can play a Charlotte and start pushing through pressure that way. We do see the Charlotte here, which is not the best grab, but it does put us in a position to at least have a very large flying Faria. But again, we still need the Excalibur to make that worth our time. Now he has to try to pick what card he's going to play here off of the Aramaki, the Major. It's probably going to be Charlotte. The Wings of the Archangel, not going to do much. The Faria can't really do much here. Potentially the Pierre, I think, if there's a Pierre in that hand. It's kind of hard to tell. The Atlas's Castling is probably the least effective thing for him to grab right now, specifically because the deck does have Banish and spot removal that he could potentially use in response to the Atlas's Castling to kind of make it whiff. Fortunately, having to call stone, hitting a blue-white. Playing out the Pierre. And we're going to play out the Faria. And at that point in time, we'll go ahead and swing in the air for 4, taking out a 36. So establishing a pretty big board here in the sense that it's helpful to be able to get away with the Banish if he uses Aramaki and Togusa to be able to force a Banish. I can force a Banish on the Pierre so that I can keep the Charlotte around. Next turn, we're setting up to potentially, if I have another Regalia, be able to potentially play it and go into, we have the Wings of the Archangel, so I can potentially Judgment next turn. do hit the second of the 3 stones, so he's a little bit ahead of his time to be able to do things. We're going to go ahead and do, so that we can potentially cast the second Charlotte from hand, we're going to go ahead and use Crystallize here when he passes the turn to kill the Major. Take him up to 4,600 life. And then I think I forgot to draw for turn there. Maybe didn't. Gonna go ahead and use Awakening of the Winged Lord, or Awakening of the Sacred Queen for 3. This gets us a Regalia from the deck. We can grab Excalibur, use that mode to Judgment for free, and draw a card. I think we're drawing a card here. Probably not getting a Stranger, because again, we want to flip into it well. So draw a card, flip, get a Stranger at random. So now we have this nice 24/24 flying Faria. It's supported by a couple other Resonators that we can banish if he tries to do Aramaki and Tagusa. We're feeling pretty confident here. So he's responding to the thing. He's going to force me to banish something. We're going to banish the Pierre. Like I said, that's kind of why we did it. Now we get another body to be able to protect. Twin Swords of Water and Mercy, once again coming down. Not the one that we want to be seeing in this matchup for sure. We want to be seeing things like Tree Man, Ushua, to be able to push out damage. Like, these are ones that we don't want to be able to have him be protected. Like, we don't want these to be accidentally pulled into our hand from Goddard because we have no way to cast them. And we'd rather, you know, it be something like Ushua to be able to mess things up. So thankfully those stones flipped in the same order. Before recovery, we're going to go ahead and see another Major dive. So we get to see that last card. That last card is a Lars. One Major doesn't typically bother us right now because, again, we're at the point where we have, so even though he's at 7 will here, 10 will technically, if he drops the 7 drop, our Faria is bigger than it, which is very, very nice. That's exactly where we want to be, and we have access to, you know, if he's going to try to swing, we can potentially use Alice's Castling on the Faricia to get a second Charlotte into play. There's a lot of different things we can do here, especially if we top deck another Excalibur, we're in a really good spot. So we're going to see the double dive, followed up with the Aramaki and Tagusa. This forces me to banish 2 Resonators. So now here's where we get into a pretty weird spot. We're going to have to banish the Faricia and the Twin Swords to leave the Charlotte up, because we have to be able to apply that pressure with the 24/24 Faria. Cast the Aramaki and Tagusa to draw 3 more cards, because he'll draw 1 from playing it, and then he'll draw 2 more from the effect of it itself. Play the Major, using the 1 floating, which draws him another card. And at that point in time, he can cast he can declare Charlotte. And then does happen to draw another Aramaki and Tagusa to make me banish another 2. So there goes the Charlotte anyway. Knowing that we're going to we just need to try to draw into another card anyway. We're going to try to use Alice's Castling on the Charlotte. We're going to have to banish it regardless. Ultimately, this is just to try to have us draw a card. We can't recast it. And we know we just need to see some kind of effect happen here to be able to potentially get us to something different. So it's just kind of card cycling there in response to the banish. Then playing another one of these. I do get to swing in the air for 14, but ultimately we know that he could start dropping Majors next turn, which is not a good spot for me to be in, because as we talked about before, with me not being able to play Charlotte, he's always going to be able to do more damage than I can, and he's going to be healing every single time he does damage, as opposed to I only heal on the turn I do God Art. Swing for 14 in the air, take him down to 26. Play the Vala. We'll try to steal the double dive, just to try to minimize the value as much as possible. The double dive is insane when you start to grab the Bateau and Kusanagi, where that gets you any card that has Kusanagi in its name. So then you pay 1 and grab 2 of the 7 drops and put them in your hand. That's really definitely not what I want to see from him, especially if he doesn't have one yet. The more resources he has to play actively before he can do that is better for me. Because it means that I'm more likely to be able to survive. Unfortunately, he just has one in hand anyway, so we're already in a bad spot. Still sitting on 6 additional will, because again, each of those Prime Minister's offices produces 3. Chooses to pass the turn and not swing in, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. He's trying to do something potentially before recovery here. I don't really know if there was a risk to him swinging with the major, knowing that he's going to be able to get more, especially since I'm tapped out, you know, being able to swing in the air for 14. Going into combat in the air, attempting to attack the Motoko. Or thinking about attacking the Motoko, but then I'm like, wait a minute, if I play the Charlotte, it's completely unprotected. I might as well just go face. Taking him down to 12. Paul doesn't really care though, he's just going to gain that back next turn. Choosing to use, like I said, there's the Kusanagi Motoko's buddy, which lets him just grab another 7 drop straight to his hand. And at this point in time, we're definitely in a behind the game, losing game. I can do the same thing that I did before last time with being able to perform Goddard and keep it alive, but ultimately he doesn't even need to swing at the Faria. He can just swing both and put pressure through for this last turn with what I have. Completely defenseless here. I have 1 blocker. He forces me to bounce it back to my hand, and I'm goofing around with him here, bouncing it back to my hand because I'm the owner of, the controller of the card at the moment. It ultimately doesn't matter. I'm not going to be casting it because it's during my end phase and it gets lethal anyway. Just doing a little bit of screwing around with Paul. If that Magic Stone had been a Light Vapors instead of a if that Magic Stone had been a Light Vapors instead of a Ataractia's Memoria, there was a potential playline here. So he's going to have a 3rd major on the field because we do play 2 copies of Antarite, the Stranger, who you can banish 2 Water Magic Stones instead of paying her cost, which forces your opponent to tap down all your J Resonators. Because the playline here is to say, like, if I Goddard here, and then I get the Antarite after he's committed all of his stuff to board, I can tap everything down, and then I can push him back for the crackback, which is pretty much the only play line here. Unfortunately, the other issue is that I cannot use Wings to the Archangel to pay for Strangers, which I'm just a little bit too few will short. I'm essentially 1 blue or 1 Waterstone short of being able to do that play line, but I also have to get Antarite to hand. So down comes an Aramaki, or a 2nd major. Plays the Aramaki and Togusa to draw 3 more cards. And then just starts swinging in here. So that is, there's nothing I can do here at this match. So that is going to be the game. But I think this is a good illustration of kind of what the Aramaki deck is capable of. If it does get to a point where it has the resources available, it just kind of always will find 2, if not 3, if not 4 of the 7 drops and to continue to slam them into your opponent over and over and over again. The Faria deck is very, very fun. It's definitely a deck that is more of a casual build, but it is definitely a lot of fun and does have the potential to really push pressure. So I hope you guys enjoyed seeing at least a little bit of taste of it. We didn't get to see some of the craziness of what it can do with Shakti on the field, with cloning things like Wings of the Awakening of the Sacred Queen, Awakening of the Winged Lord. But it is definitely a fun deck that I definitely recommend you guys to check out. We'll have deck profiles for both of these. I am trying to do the Antarite play here with God Art, but I'm like, again, 1 wheel short because of the fact that I can't pay for strangers with Wings of the Archangel. So deck profiles for both of these lists will be up later this week. I hope you guys have enjoyed the fact that we're getting back to real life feature matches. I'm really excited to be able to play with Paul on a more consistent basis and get footage back for you guys and deck profiles. But let us know what you thought, or if there's a specific deck or ruler or color combination that you'd like us to try to approach. We're trying to stick away from playing anything related to Altar and Sigurd shenanigans, as we're trying to use as few DBV cards as possible moving into the release of AO4, just because we want to be able to get access and show cards that are for the people who are new to the community. But we'll talk more about that in the future. So until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.